My final service was a benefice communion held at Geldeston, followed by a lunch in the village hall. 100 people were there. It was a very good send-off, and we were presented with a flowering cherry tree and a cheque for £600. The following day the removal men arrived at 8:30 and the loaded van away by 6:30 p.m. At 8 p.m. we left, Peter in the micro with me and Bertie with Jan in the Mondeo following us. In the dark, travelling along the A14 West, Jan's headlights suddenly disappeared from my rear view mirror. I stopped and called her on the mobile phone. She had followed a group of cars onto the A11 travelling south towards London. Communication was made particularly difficult by Peter's incessant meowing from his cat basket. Jan found her way back onto the A14, but then proceeded to travel eastward. Eventually we did meet up again. Thank goodness for mobile phones. We arrived at Culworth at midnight. The following morning we locked Peter in the downstairs loo and began the process of unloading from the main road, as the van was too large to come up the drive. I put up the garden shed and the removal men were on their way at about 7 p.m. Peter soon settled in, and the next day we installed a cat flap for him. While workmen completed the installation of the new kitchen, we put up shelves and wardrobes and unpacked and shared meals with parishioners. Friends and relations joined the large congregation that assembled at Chipping Warden Church. At the end, Jan and I stood at the door to shake everyone's hand. And so began the process of getting to know the thousands of people now under my care in the 6 villages. Jan and I attended the biennial Colonial Dames of America Day at Sulgrave Manor, once the home of George Washington. The manor became a centre of Anglo-American cooperation at the beginning of the 20th century. At the start of half-term, Paul brought Skye on the train. Then they set to work creating flower beds and vegetable plots for us. We were invited to the home of John and Jenny Roberts for dinner. John was incumbent in the neighbouring Astwell group of parishes, and his father was rector of Kettering's St. Peter and Paul at the time when Dad was vicar of St. Andrew's Church. John ran a miniature railway in his large garden. Skye, Jan and I went to the Hill in Thorpe Mandeville for lunch and to discuss the impending wedding for their daughter. The lady of the house, who reminded me of Christine Hamilton, showed Skye a trick with an egg, a glass of water, a matchbox and a hockey stick, whereby she hit the egg with the stick, and rather than breaking it ended up safely in the glass of water. At Culworth we had a wonderful summer's evening for the church fete. It was a good chance to meet many people from the village. I opened the fete and Jan gave out the prizes at the end. Jan gave Skye, who was with us while Paul and Catherine went to the Glastonbury Festival, £2 to spend. He seemed to thoroughly enjoy himself. The event brought to mind William Blake's poem, Echoing Green. I conducted a society wedding at Chipping Warden, being the largest church. There were some 400 guests, and the father of the bride had brought in a choir, organist and mini orchestra from Oxford. As I completed the words, "Let no one put asunder," the thunder-like sounds of kettle drums were heard. Jan and I were disappointed about the reception afterwards on two accounts. Firstly, it was not a sit-down meal, and secondly, Jan suffered badly from food poisoning after eating the seafood snacks that were provided in the garden. Father Brian Oman, a retired priest living in Sulgrave, celebrated his 90th birthday with a Eucharist at Sulgrave Church. A member of the congregation, Anne Magness, was pricked in her knee by a needle that had been left in a communion rail kneeler. She and her husband Peter threatened legal action, sending formal letters and taking photographs of the injury. We were invited to Barbara and Dick Bartlett's home for a buffet supper with members of the Chipping Warden Church Players. It looked like Jan and I were expected to join them. Catherine was now heavily involved as a student on the midwifery course, so Skye came to visit us on a number of occasions, spending a lot of time in the garden at Culworth Rectory. And what are you doing, Skye?
Granddad, just come and look at this. It's alive. It's alive. Come on.
What is it?
You've got to see it. Stop recording.
Now, Skye, do you want to tell me about the garden?
Okay. Then be careful with some missiles. Ow! Right, these flowers here, not that good. These, there's some, little teeny flowers. And right now they are really big and beautiful, don't they?
We went for a meal with Rosemary and Peter Fenwick, who owned the department stores of the same name. As we were leaving, Jan remarked on the large number of books they had. Peter said that he had every book that Dick Francis had written, all signed, and 2 valuable first editions. Jan said that she had read one of his books, but didn't like it enough to read another one. It turned out that they were personal friends of Dick Francis, and in the room was a big bunch of flowers that the author had sent them that day. Mum and Dad came to visit. I took them on a tour of the 6 churches, and we all went to Northampton to buy a new computer from PC World, my old one having broken down completely. A computer expert named Dave Sussman, who worked for Microsoft and lived in Culworth, kindly came round to help me set it up and transfer files from the old hard disk. There was a knock on the rectory door at 7:30 a.m. Jeff Mould had come to say that he thought I should be keeping the moles away from his wife's grave. This is the same man who complained to the parish council that on windy days leaves were blowing in through his door when he opened it. Jan and I drove over to Berkhamsted to celebrate Auntie Edna's 80th birthday with the Priestley family. 3 days later we drove up to Woodford for the funeral of Uncle Eric. Heather asked me to conduct the service and read a tribute on her behalf. Anne Barber was diagnosed with an inoperable cancer. She and Dave came over to stay with us. She had lost a lot of weight. Later Dave rang to inform us that she had died, so we drove over to Somerset to attend her funeral. I read out Dave's tribute to Anne. Jan and I took part in Barbara Bartlett's 1940s Ensa show at Chipping Warden Village Hall. In an Air Commodore's uniform, I introduced the 2 acts, in the air raid shelter and in the works canteen. I sang As Time Goes By, and Jan sang George Formby's Leaning on a Lamp. All those who attended were given a meal made from rationed food: cottage pie with corned beef, apple pie with custard. Jan also went with Mary on a 12-day cruise from Southampton to Madeira, Tenerife, Gran Canaria, Malaga, Gibraltar and Lisbon. Barbara Bartlett's 2005 pantomime Robin Hood and the Babes in the Wood. Jan was in the chorus and also led the woodland fairies in singing Golden Slumbers. I was the king, appearing in the 4th act, accompanied by a jester, Len Tuckey, whose job was to blow a whistle to let people know when they should laugh at my jokes. Elizabeth came to see the pantomime on the first night and made a video recording. She summed it all up very accurately by saying that the performance was intriguingly awful. The first night's performance was not helped by the fact that the person playing the knight was taken ill, and at the last minute Eric Frith kindly agreed to step in, script in hand.
Had a very good day's hunting yesterday. I killed 3 stags, 2 bears, and wounded the Sheriff of Nottingham. Yay! Not mortally, I hope, Your Majesty. Only slightly. He didn't seem to mind. After all, an arrow shot by the king is nothing to have a row about. An abandoned woman?
I introduced some new midweek communion services in 2005. There were 12 of us for Epiphany at Culworth, where we paraded the 3 wise men into the stable. There were 18 of us for the Presentation of Christ at Morton Pinkney, where we paraded with candles to the font. There were 19 of us at Sulgrave for Ash Wednesday, where we were imposed with ashes. And the day before, Jan and I attended Barbara Bartlett's pancake race coffee morning. We also attended Barbara Bartlett's very popular frugal lunches, helped with the spring clean of Culworth Church, organised by Shirley Trott, and were very pleased with the response to the Maundy Thursday service, at which feet were washed and 18 attended, and the 2-hour Good Friday service, to which over 40 people came. On Sunday the 15th of May there was a superb response to the Whit Walk. At 9 a.m. over 50 people attended Chipping Warden for Holy Communion, followed by a 5-star breakfast put on by Barbara Bartlett. 30 of us walked over to Edgecote for Sung Matins, which was attended by over 50 people. 18 of us then set off towards Thorpe Mandeville, stopping on the way at Edgecote Lodge farm to eat our lunches on the lawn, with a wonderful panorama of the countryside to view. On the next leg, Jan, Dick Bartlett, Cathy Hoggins and Shirley Trott lost their way and I had to go looking for them. At 3 p.m, 35 people assembled for evensong at Thorpe Mandeville Church. George Metcalfe planned the walking route and had walked from Thorpe over to Chipping Warden first thing to check the ground. The weather was perfect all day long. We took Skye to the 1940s dance organised by Barbara Bartlett to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II. He took part in the dancing and was very pleased to win the Pass the Parcel game. John Turner of Culworth placed a large sum of money on a particular horse that was running in the Derby. So we watched the race on television. It won, and then suddenly John was there in the enclosure celebrating with all the owners. A busy month preparing for the launch of our new magazine, Now We Are 6. The Cooperative Society funeral directors agreed to print it in colour. They reduced their original quotation from £300 to £100 per issue on the basis that we would give them free advertising. Shirley Tuckey, the editor, became familiar with Microsoft Publisher, and I hunted for article contributors. Jan contacted local businesses to sell them advertising space in order to finance the whole thing. Jan earned £1,000 marking primary school SATs tests for Edexcel. With the money, she had a spending spree, purchasing a video camera, satellite navigation system and a new computer for herself. Took Mum and Dad to the Oxford Story, and then found that the weather was too wet to take our intended punt on the river. St Andrew's Kettering men's group came to Chipping Warden Church. I led the service and Dad preached. We attended fetes at Culworth, where Jan went on the jousting ride, and Thorpe Mandeville, where scarecrows was the theme. Len Tuckey made a bishop. Later Len discovered that the bishop was missing and found it behind the church wall. As he began to re-erect it, a woman on horseback appeared and said that she had taken it down because it was disturbing the horses. On one of our walks around Boddington Reservoir, Bertie became confused and wandered off. In August, we attended the wedding of Daniel and Sarah in Leicester.
Hang on a minute. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Shouldn't have said that. Sorry.
It hasn't broken, not yet.
Nice one.
Hasn't. Do you have a winner? Congratulations, Calder.
Thanks, sir.